Welcome back. We are talking about detoxification rescue. I think that's what we should call this week. We're here with Dr. David Root, his son Daniel, Anne-Marie Principe. I'm just
so interesting,
fascinated, blown away. I know what the brains of the people exposed to toxins look like. That's how I got interested, because I would see these awful looking brains and I'm like, oh, maybe they're a drug addict, but they weren't. And then I had to go, well, what is it? It could be mold exposure, an environmental toxin, maybe an infection.
Or like they said, painting.
I have great painter stories as well. But let's bring Daniel in, because I know you're involved in working with your father, but you've actually been an entrepreneur in the field of information technology for a long time. And so switching over to managing your dad's practice must have been interesting. So tell us about your role in all of this, Daniel.
Well, thank you for having us on. And my role really started back in 1985. I was asked by my father to set up a billing system and a practice management system. And back in 1985, we didn't have DOS, we didn't have Windows, we didn't have any of the main things today, but I did find a suitable platform and installed it at his office. Well, as I was the only one who had ever put this particular hardware with the operating system and the medical billing system together, I was the only one who really knew it. And I wound up having to support it. And I went to work for him. And as part of the requirement for working for them, they put me through, I like to say they volunteered me to go through the detox program. And I actually went 33 days on the program, and it was about 4 to 5 hours a day back then. And I can tell you that I have attributed my excellent health the rest of my adult life to that program. And throughout the years, I was in and out of his medical practice as his IT specialist, because I'd started my own IT company. I basically launched from his medical practice. And so I was in and out of there a lot. And I was very, very excited about what that protocol represented, but it was pretty well exclusive in the occupational medical world. But what happened was after the 2003 period, where most of the Scientologists that were working with my father went to New York, I wound up taking over as the interim executive director for the medical practice. And during that time, we really were no longer actively doing the detox at the medical clinic. It was pretty much exclusively at that point in New York. And the work they did was phenomenal. They did just wonderful things out there, but we weren't actively doing it in Sacramento. Well, around 2012, my wife, Susie, was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism. And we just accepted her primary care provider's advice to have her thyroid destroyed with radioactive iodine. And after that occurred, she wasn't getting any better. And in fact, not only was she getting worse, she was now beholden to the pharmaceutical industry for her thyroid medication. And that wasn't sitting well with us. So we wound up doing some research that we really should have done prior to the RAI therapy. And that's when we discovered two things that just changed our world. If we had just changed our diet and stopped eating these prepackaged processed convenience or fast foods, eat non-GMO, organic foods, eat the organics, and also maybe even grow our own food. That would have been one of the two things that would have changed her story and her outcome. The second thing was we realized that toxins, or really what are called xenobiotics, the foreign chemicals and heavy metals to the body, these are the ones that are fat stored if they're lipophilic kind or fat loving. They get sequestered in the fat because the natural detoxification pathways are just not going to be able to process them properly. So, if you will, to protect the other organs, these toxins are being sequestered away. And unfortunately, that includes the brain, which is 60 to 70% fat, as you well know. So we're seeing a lot of problems like your autoimmune and endocrine, inflammatory, and neurological diseases have a basis in poor nutrition and these xenobiotics. But what really destroyed my feeling about the medical solution that they provided my wife was the fact that if we had just put her through that detox program and changed our diet, her outcome would have been completely different. And so I really made it a mission of mine to see this come to the health and wellness world after that occurred, so that others don't have to suffer the fate that she did.
Such a great story. I was actually on a podcast yesterday, and the host basically said type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle choice. And I'm like, you want to rethink that a little bit. Yes, for some, type 2 diabetes is because they're eating toxic, poisonous food. But for other people, they've been poisoned. And there's actually this fascinating book called The Toxin Solution. If you guys haven't seen it, I love it. It's by Joe Pizzorno. And
actually, if I may interrupt, I do refer to it in my book, Sauna Detoxification Using Niacin. I actually recommend people go through that prior to us.
It's a wonderful book. And he basically said both diabetes and obesity is not just a lifestyle issue, but it's the obesogens that it is involved in toxicity. That's why for us, if you want to keep your brain healthy or rescue if it's headed to the dark place, you have to prevent or treat the 11 major risk factors that steal your mind. Our mnemonic is bright minds, and the T is toxins. Now, it's not the only thing, but it's clearly one of the hallmark things if you want to treat your anxiety, your depression, your beginning dementia, your ADD, whatever. And you know a lot about thyroid
I
issues.
went down the thyroid road to hell. So, yeah, I get it. Yes.
So, which of the three of you want to tell us about the program? Now, in this podcast, we only have 3 minutes left, but then we'll spend a lot of the next one on the actual program itself. But who can give us a high-level overview of what this is?
Well, let me just go through the Hubbard Detox. Now let Dan explain the changes that he's put in place with the detoxination program. The way the Hubbard program works, it's based on the methods which he found would mobilize fat. And by doing that, one releases the toxic materials, the toxic metals, and so on, stored therein into the bloodstream. And the mechanisms that he used were niacin, which is a key ingredient because it's a very potent lipolytic if it's used properly. He used exercise, aerobic type exercise, which also is well known to cause lipolysis, and also heat exposure in the sauna. So putting those three together with proper replenishment, nutrition, and so on is the way that the program works. And the way it actually shakes out is that the individual comes into the facility, takes the niacin, and the ideal is to wait for 2 hours. But when we were doing it in my clinic, it was usually more like 45 minutes. So we weren't getting the full benefit from the niacin. After about 30 to 40 minutes, the niacin flush hits. Now, some people consider this to be a toxic reaction, but it really isn't. It's a reaction which we use because by causing the flushing, the individual is going to sweat at a much higher level. And so it does encourage sweating. So you have that. And in the interim, while we're waiting for the niacin flush, the individual would exercise on a treadmill, go out and walk, do push-ups, whatever kind of exercise that the individual could do depending on his or fitness background. And then when the flush hits into the sauna, they would go. Now, in my clinic, I always used the typical convection sauna because that's all we had for the most part back in those days. And the flushing is at a maximum about the time they go into the sauna. And not only the liquid sweat, but the sebaceous sweat, the lipid part of the sweat is maximized. And they'll sit in the sauna up to 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, up to tolerance, really. There's no maximum time that they have to sit in the sauna. When they feel uncomfortable, they come out, they take a shower, they cleanse off whatever sweat and other materials that are on the skin, rest, replenish fluids and electrolytes, and then go back into the sauna. And they may be in the 4 or 5 hour period that we had them on the program, they would be in and out of the sauna maybe 5 to 7 times. And then at the end of the period, they would replenish electrolytes for the last time, and they would be given vitamins to take when they got home. So there's a very definite replenishment program, because obviously you're not just removing the toxic materials through the sweat, you're also removing some of the vitamins and a lot of other minerals and that need to be replenished. Without putting those back into the system, the person could theoretically get very, very sick. Mm-hmm. We did not have a problem with that. There were practically never any problems from the niacin or from the sauna exposure. And we had absolutely remarkable results in probably 99% of the patients we put through the program.
Wow. Well, when we come back, we're going to unpack this a little bit more, talk about some of the dosages of niacin, other kinds of exercise. Stay with us. Fascinating discussion with Dr. Root, Daniel Root, Anne-Marie Principe. Stay with us.
If you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're considering coming to Amen Clinics or trying some of the brain healthy supplements from BrainMD, you can use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or a 10% discount on all supplements at brainmdhealth.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.